Hey guys! Tonight we begin with the rowdy, smoky, and slightly sticky world of the Medieval Tavern. The unsung heart of every town, the unofficial news center, and the only place where a knight, a farmer, and a bard could all get equally drunk and equally robbed. It wasn't just a place to drink. It was a place where danger, laughter, and disease mingled freely beneath a thatched roof. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've trudged through a muddy street that smells like a blend of horse, smoke, and questionable soup. It's raining, of course, or just finished, so everything's slick, including your only pair of shoes. You're tired, you're hungry, and you've nearly been run over by a cart full of turnips twice. You need a drink. You need a moment of warmth, a brief escape from the damp chill that has settled deep into your bones. The world outside is gray, wet, and relentlessly demanding. The day's labor is done, or perhaps you're a traveler who has just arrived within the town walls, muscles aching from the road, spirit weary from the monotonous trudge. Your stomach rumbles with an emptiness that feels ancient, a hollow echo of the miles you've covered or the hours you've toiled. So how do you find a tavern in a medieval town? There are no glowing signs, no Yelp reviews, and certainly no GPS. The very concept of a curated public recommendation system would seem like witchcraft. Here, reputation is a living thing, passed by word of mouth, a murmur in the market, a knowing nod from a fellow traveler. What you do have are your ears. And your nose. Just follow the noise, and the scent of wood smoke tinged with something vaguely like fermentation. Somewhere past the blacksmith's relentless, rhythmic forge and the fishmonger yelling about his fresh river eels is a chorus of something entirely different. It's a wave of sound, a human symphony of laughter, shouting, and someone aggressively, passionately singing about a goose. It's a sound that promises life, chaos, and ale. And there it is. A crooked wooden building, leaning slightly to the left, as if even the architecture has had one too many. It slumps against its neighbor with a kind of weary familiarity, its timbers darkened by centuries of rain and soot. The thatched roof is shaggy and uneven, with patches of moss claiming territory like tiny green conquerors. Hanging above the door is a wooden sign, barely legible in the fading light, swinging on rusty hinges that groan with every gust of wind. It bears a crude painting of, is that a barrel or a bear? Or maybe both, a bear hugging a barrel in a moment of profound, drunken affection. Either way, this is it. This is the place. Welcome to the tavern. The front step is a single, worn stone, slick with something you tell yourself is just spilled ale. You push open the heavy, iron-hinged door, and it lets out a creak so long and dramatic it might qualify as its own form of entertainment. It's a sound that announces your arrival to everyone inside, a low, groaning note that cuts through the din for just a fraction of a second before being swallowed again by the noise. Instantly, warm air and the rich perfume of smoke, wet wool, stale beer, and mystery meat hit your face like a drunken handshake. You've made it. The transition from the cold, damp outside world is jarring. The air inside is thick, almost chewable, a dense fog of human activity. Your eyes, accustomed to the gray twilight, struggle to adjust. You blink, trying to pierce the gloom, and for a moment, you are a silhouette, a dark shape framed in the doorway, a brief interruption to the scene within. The heavy door slams shut behind you with a solid, echoing thud, the sound of the world being locked out. The darkness wraps around your senses like a damp wool blanket, warm, uncomfortable, and slightly suspicious. Your eyes adjust slowly, painfully. Candlelight flickers against soot-stained walls, casting dancing, monstrous shadows that make even the chairs look like they might pick a fight. The hearth, a great stone maw, blazes in the far corner, doubling as both heating and a significant open flame hazard. Sparks fly from it like angry fireflies, landing on the floor with tiny, harmless hisses. Smoke drifts lazily in the air, not quite escaping through the chimney that might be stuffed with a dead crow, or perhaps just years of accumulated grime. It hangs in a permanent haze in the upper reaches of the room, catching the light in shifting, ghostly beams. But what hits you hardest isn't the noise or the heat. It's the smell. A medieval tavern scent is less an aromatic profile and more a form of emotional trauma. It's a complex, layered assault on the modern nose. The top notes are ale, warm, sour, and splashed liberally across every surface. It's in the wood of the tables, in the fibers of the patrons' clothes, in the very air you breathe. Beneath that, sweat. Years of it. Human sweat. Horse sweat from those who've ridden hard, and maybe the sweat of something mythical that was dragged in last Tuesday. Add a hint of moldy bread, the damp, earthy funk of wet straw, and a whisper of boiled onions, and you have a blend no perfumer has dared to bottle. And for good reason. You take a tentative step forward. The ceiling is low enough to make tall men duck and drunk men bump their heads. The heavy wooden beams above are dark and ancient, sagging slightly under the weight of the floor above, where strangers might be sleeping or gambling or both. The floor is dirt. Not metaphorically, literally. Though someone's laid down a generous amount of straw in a valiant attempt to pretend. It's cleaner. It isn't. The straw, originally meant to soak up spills and provide a bit of insulation, has long since surrendered to its fate. It's now a compressed, fragrant mat of mud, spilled ale, food scraps, and things you'd rather not identify. It rustles and squelches underfoot, a constant, soft reminder of the tavern's unhygienic soul. There are no private booths, no waiters with menus, and no such thing as quiet conversation. This is a medieval tavern, and it only comes in two settings, rowdy and closed due to fire. You spot an open seat at a lopsided bench near the hearth, a prized location for its warmth. But as you get closer, you see it's wet with something you wisely don't ask about. You decide to stand for a moment longer. Someone nearby is arguing passionately, vehemently, about a stolen chicken. Their voices rise and fall in a theatrical display of accusation and denial. Another man is passed out with a ladle still clutched in his hand, his head resting on the table amidst a puddle of what you hope is stew. A one-eyed dog, looking as grizzled and world-weary as any of the human patrons, gnaws on a bone under a table like he pays rent there. He watches you with his good eye, a silent, knowing judge. And this, my friend, is just the entrance. You've only just arrived, and already it smells, looks, and feels like a night to remember, or to forget. The tables are monuments to past patrons, carved with years of initials, crude drawings of livestock, and deep knife scars from impromptu games or settled arguments. They wobble with a kind of stubborn pride, each one a veteran of countless spills and brawls. The benches creak and groan under the weight of muddy boots, thick cloaks, and questionable decisions. The floor, as promised, is dirt, but it's a layered history. Straw from yesterday lies beneath straw from today, creating a kind of archaeological dig site of tavern life. You step carefully. One wrong move and your foot sinks into something with a texture best left undescribed, a soft, yielding sensation that sends a shudder up your spine. The crowd is a living, breathing organism. Loud, unrestrained laughter erupts in one corner, while two men argue about the price of a pig in another, their faces inches apart, their voices thick with ale and conviction. A woman slams a heavy clay mug down on a table hard enough to spill half her drink, and no one even flinches. It's a punctuation mark in the tavern's ongoing sentence. A man at the next table stares at you with the dazed, unfocused look of someone who's either thinking very deeply or has forgotten how chairs work. His eyes are glazed, his mouth slightly agape, a portrait of profound intoxication. Someone nearby sneezes, a wet, explosive sound. The entire left side of the room collectively leans away in a practiced, fluid motion of self-preservation. Hygiene is personal, and everyone is minding their own. And still, despite the overwhelming assault on your modern sensibilities, there's something welcoming here. Something raw and real. The tavern is alive. It's rough, completely unfiltered, the medieval version of a community hub, minus the sanitation and with 400% more shouting. This is where life happens, unvarnished and loud. It's a refuge from the cold, a sanctuary from the silence of a lonely road, a place where for the price of a drink, you are no longer alone. You find your seat. It's a bit damp. It's probably cursed. But for now, it's yours. At first glance, the tavern's layout looks like someone arranged the furniture during an earthquake and then just decided to leave it that way. There's no blueprint, no designated bar area, no cozy booths in the back. It's just a sprawling, uneven spillage of tables, benches, barrels, and the occasional wooden crate being passed off as a seat. Everything is either too close together or too far apart, depending on how drunk you are. The arrangement seems to have been dictated by a combination of necessity, chaos, and the slow, geological drift of furniture over decades. The hearth is the only real centerpiece. A big, open fire roaring against one wall, doing its best to provide warmth, light, and a healthy dose of indoor smoke inhalation. Around it, people crowd in for comfort, like moths with mugs. Those with the best seats, right in the golden circle of warmth, hog it shamelessly, turning their backs to the rest of the room. Those without, well, that's what ale is for. The internal warmth of alcohol is a fine substitute for the external warmth of a fire. The bar, if you can call it that, is usually just a thick wooden plank resting across two barrels, sagging under the weight of earthenware jugs, pewter mugs, and the elbows of thirsty patrons. Behind it stands the tavern keeper, a figure of immense importance, multitasking between pouring drinks, yelling orders at a harried assistant, and giving that one guy in the corner the death stare of, "You still haven't paid for last Tuesday." There are no beer taps, no cocktail shakers. Drinks are ladled from open barrels into whatever vessel is clean-ish and available. There are no menus. You don't browse a list of options. You approach the keeper, wait for a pause in the shouting, and ask what's available. The answer is usually ale or cider, followed by an impatient look that encourages you to make a decision quickly. You might get a curt, "Pottage is on," but that's the extent of the culinary briefing. You ask, you pay, and you brace yourself. A narrow, rickety staircase, possibly original to the building and definitely splintery, leads to the upstairs rooms. If you squint through the smoky gloom, you can see a boot hanging from one of the railing posts. No one's entirely sure if it's decorative, a forgotten piece of property, or a warning to those who don't pay their lodging fees. It's best not to ask. Those rooms, available for a few extra pennies, offer a place to sleep, but not necessarily privacy or peace. Some taverns have a back room. The door is usually smaller, set in an obscure corner, and kept closed. What goes on back there is a matter of speculation. It might be for storage, full of sacks of grain and barrels of salted fish. It might be for illegal gambling, where the stakes are higher and the cheating more sophisticated. Or it might be where the last person who insulted the barmaid was taken, never to be seen again. Again, it's best not to ask. Curiosity is a luxury not always afforded to tavern patrons. The walls are stained with generations of candle soot, a dark patina that has become part of the structure itself. The windows, small and few, are covered with greasy, stretched cloth or scraped animal hide, which lets in a dim, murky light during the day but does little to keep out the drafts at night. Every surface has been thoroughly polished by the elbows, boots, and spilled drinks of generations past. And maybe a chicken. Somehow, a chicken always seems to be involved, pecking at scraps on the floor with an air of entitlement. Despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, the system works. Everyone knows where to go, how to sit, when to shout, and when to duck. It's not organized, but it is alive. It's a self-regulating ecosystem of noise, drink, and humanity. Every medieval tavern has a ruler. And it's not the local lord or the tax collector. It's the tavern keeper. They may not wear a crown, but don't be fooled. This person runs the show. They are equal parts chef, server, accountant, babysitter, and, when necessary, the executioner of barroom justice. The tavern keeper is a one-person institution, and they take no nonsense. If it's a man, he's likely built like a barrel with arms, grizzled, grumpy, and seemingly carved from cured meat and bad decisions. His face is a roadmap of past fights and long nights. His hands are calloused, and his apron has seen more tragedy than a Greek play. If it's a woman, and often it was, alewives were a common and respected profession. She's sharper than a blacksmith's file and can silence a room with a single, withering look. Either way, they've seen everything, heard worse, and have probably cleaned blood out of straw before breakfast on more than one occasion. They greet regulars with a nod, strangers with a look of deep suspicion, and troublemakers with a tankard to the head. Behind the bar, they keep a flawless mental tab on who's paid, who owes, and who's had 3 too many. They do it all without writing anything down, because while medieval literacy might be rare, tavern memory is terrifyingly accurate. They remember the coin you owe from last harvest festival, and they will collect. The tavern keeper sets the tone of the entire establishment. If they're in a good mood, the place hums with a relatively friendly energy. If they're in a bad mood, you'd better drink fast, pay promptly, and keep your jokes to yourself. They're the referee in every argument, the judge in every cheating scandal, and the first to grab a hefty wooden club from under the counter when a fight breaks out. You do not mess with the tavern keeper. Their authority is absolute within these 4 walls. They also know everything. The tavern is the central node of the town's information network, and the keeper is its operator. Who's in debt? Who's having an affair with the baker's wife? Who just arrived in town under a false name? Need information? Bribe the barkeep with a silver coin. Need protection from a local bully? Sit near them. Need a favor? You'd better hope you didn't break a mug last week. Historians still argue whether the notoriously inconsistent strength of medieval ale was a result of primitive brewing methods or a deliberate business strategy by keepers to sell more drinks without getting patrons dangerously drunk too quickly. Some keepers have a helper, a son, a daughter, a spouse, or an orphan they sort of adopted and now make carry barrels twice their weight. These assistants scurry through the crowd, running drinks, mopping up spills with a dirty rag, and trying not to get stepped on by drunks. They are the silent, overworked gears in the tavern's chaotic machine. So, while the tavern may feel like pure, unadulterated chaos to you, it's actually a very delicate ecosystem. And in the center of it all, commanding the scene like a storm god in an apron, stands the one person keeping the ale flowing and the roof from collapsing into a full-blown riot, the tavern keeper. You watch them for a moment, a figure of stoic endurance, and feel a sense of security. As long as they are here, the world inside this smoky room will hold together. So, you finally settle onto that creaky bench, dodging elbows and the spray from a nearby argument. Your throat's dry, your boots are damp, and it's time for the main event, the drink. But don't expect a wine list, a craft beer menu, or a polished mug. This is a medieval tavern. Your choices are limited, lukewarm, and possibly life-threatening. Let's start with the classic, ale. Unfiltered, unpasteurized, and usually brewed in the back room where the dog sleeps. It's thick, cloudy, and often comes with floaties, bits of grain, yeast, or possibly a chunk of the previous customer's mustache. It's not cold, because there's no refrigeration. The concept of ice is a luxury reserved for the highest nobility, and even then, it's a seasonal treat. You don't ask how long it's been sitting in the barrel. You just drink it and hope for the best. It's served in a rough-hewn wooden tankard, a clay mug, or if the tavern is prosperous, a dented pewter vessel. You take a sip. It's earthy, slightly sour, and has a bready taste. It's nourishing in its own way. This isn't just a beverage. It's liquid bread, a source of calories that gets you through the day. Next up, mead. Honey wine. Sounds fancy, right? In reality, it's sweet, strong, and occasionally explosive if the fermentation process went a bit rogue. If the tavern keeper made it themselves, it might be delicious, a golden nectar that warms you from the inside out. Or it might taste like regret and bee venom. It's usually served to nobles, wedding guests, or that one bard in the corner who insists on being paid in gold or mead. Then there's cider, made from apples that were either freshly picked from the orchard or dropped on the ground 3 weeks ago and are just now being put to use. It's sharp, tangy, and served in cracked mugs that may double as soup bowls by morning. It's the drink of choice in orchard-rich regions, or for those who want something just alcoholic enough to forget the smell of the man sitting beside them. Wine? Technically, yes. But unless you're in the south of Europe or the local nobility is in town, it's likely watered down, soured, and served with a side of sarcasm. Good wine is reserved for lords, bishops, and the wealthy merchant who just sold 12 crates of salt. What you're likely to get is a thin, acidic liquid that barely qualifies as wine at all. And water? That's a bold choice. A truly reckless decision. Because half the time, it's teeming with invisible death. Water from the local river or a shallow well is a gamble with your life. Dysentery, cholera, and a host of other waterborne illnesses are rampant. Boiling costs fuel, and clean wells are rare. That's why even children drink ale. The brewing process, involving boiling the water, kills most of the harmful bacteria. It's not about the buzz. It's about not dying before the age of 8. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact of the era. Alcohol was often safer than water. No one's measuring shots or crafting cocktails here. You drink from mugs that may still have last night's stew clinging to the bottom. You raise your mug, sniff it cautiously, and take a sip. It's warm, it's bitter, and somehow, it's perfect. Because in the medieval tavern, if it's wet and won't kill you immediately, it's a fine vintage. So you've survived the drink, barely. Now your stomach growls, a loud, insistent reminder that you haven't eaten since sunrise, and your last meal was mostly barley and sadness. Time to eat. But don't get excited. There's no menu, no waiter, and absolutely no one asking if you have any dietary restrictions. You don't order food in a medieval tavern. You ask what's left, then hope it's hot and only vaguely mysterious. The star of the tavern table is usually pottage. This is a thick, hearty stew made from whatever grains, vegetables, and questionable proteins were lying around that day. It's been cooking in the same pot over the fire since Monday, and it's now Thursday. New ingredients are added daily. Nothing is removed. It's less of a meal and more of a culinary time capsule, a perpetual stew where you might find remnants of meals from days past. If meat is involved, congratulations. It's probably rabbit, pigeon, or the unlucky chicken who wandered too close to the fire. If it's game meat, it might be delicious, rich, and flavorful. Or it might be aged past the point of reason and seasoned with a heavy hand of desperation to mask the taste. Your bowl is made of wood or clay, maybe a hollowed-out piece of hard bread known as a trencher, which you can eat afterward if you're still hungry. Your spoon is either your own, which you carry with you, or your fingers. Most people carry their own knife, so eating is a BYO cutlery affair. And don't expect napkins. Just use the sleeve of your tunic or a shared rag hanging nearby that's seen things it'll never forget. Bread is also on offer. It's tough, dark, and heavy, more a weapon than a food. If it's soft, it was baked today. If it's hard enough to knock someone out, it was baked last week. Either way, it's perfect for sopping up the last of your pottage. It pairs well with cheese that smells like an old boot and has started developing its own personality. Sometimes there's salted fish, pungent and chewy. Sometimes there are pickled eggs, a sour, rubbery delicacy. Occasionally, you'll find a tavern offering a special, which is just a fancier way of saying, we had too much of this particular ingredient lying around. Flavor is optional, and the texture is unpredictable. Still, in the flickering firelight, with the noise all around and the warmth of the food in your hands, it's not bad. It's filling. It's hot. And if you don't think too hard about what's floating in your bowl, it might even be comforting. You're not here for fine dining. You're here to eat like a survivor, to fill your belly against the cold and the long night ahead. Once you've found your seat, ideally one without a knife stuck in it, you start to notice the real entertainment, the people. A medieval tavern is the original social media feed, loud, chaotic, half-true, and fully committed to oversharing. To your left, there's a red-faced farmer, already deep into his fourth ale, retelling the same story about his cow giving birth sideways. He slaps your shoulder mid-sentence like you're a lifelong friend, or a good replacement for the pig he usually drinks with. At the far end of the room, a hooded stranger sits in the shadows, nursing a single drink slowly. He could be a runaway monk, or a bandit, or just really bad at eye contact. Either way, you're not making small talk with him unless you want to disappear behind the stables. Near the hearth, a soldier in battered armor is regaling a group with tales of battle. His story involves dragons, Frenchmen, and a talking sword. It's definitely false. No one cares. His tankard is full, and his audience is laughing. There's a merchant, loud and sweaty, shouting prices for grain that no one asked for. He pulls gold coins from his pouch like a man begging to be robbed by midnight. A pair of locals play dice on a warped table, their expressions intense. One of them clearly cheats. The other knows and lets it happen, probably saving the fight for when his ale runs out. A bard strums in the corner, his voice cracking on the high notes of a love song that sounds suspiciously like one he just made up. No one minds. He's wearing pants, and he's mostly in tune. That's already better than last night's guy. Women wander through the crowd. Some are tavern staff, others are working their own business. They're sharp-eyed, confident, and absolutely not to be trifled with. They'll flirt, laugh, or knock your teeth in, depending on your tone. Children occasionally dart between legs, swiping leftover bread or a dropped coin. No one stops them. It's just part of the rhythm. Everyone is watching, drinking, plotting, and pretending not to notice the man slumped under the table. This tavern isn't just a place to eat and drink. It's a living, breathing performance. And tonight, you're part of the cast. Forget lutes and ballads for a moment. The real soundtrack of a medieval tavern isn't a song. It's a symphony of chaos. It begins with the clink of mugs, dozens of them slamming against wood in celebration, negotiation, or drunken misfire. Some clang cheerfully, others shatter completely. Both are met with cheers. Then comes the laughter. Big, loud, belly laughter that sounds like it escaped from a wild boar. Most of it makes no sense. A farmer chuckles at his own joke about hay. A knight giggles at the word pottage. A monk wheezes uncontrollably every time someone says, duck. You learn quickly not to ask. Voices layer over one another, each louder than the last, fighting for dominance like roosters in a coop. There's arguing, storytelling, shouting about taxes, and at least one person misquoting scripture to win a bet. The bartender yells orders while swatting flies. A barmaid shouts at a man who tried to grab her, and someone keeps repeating, another round. Like a battle cry. And in the corner, the bard with a half-tuned lute and 3 missing strings plays the same 4 chords on a loop, occasionally bursting into verses about lost love, found chickens, or a nobleman who wore his pants backward. No one really listens unless he starts singing about someone in the room, at which point things get very entertaining or very dangerous. Someone spills something. Someone burps loud enough to make the rafters tremble. Someone else falls off a bench and keeps talking from the floor as if it's intentional. In the background, dogs bark. A goat bleats. Why is there a goat? And chairs scrape across dirt like thunderclaps in a wooden cavern. It's not peaceful, but it's oddly rhythmic. Occasionally, the room goes quiet. Not by choice, just a sudden, inexplicable lull. It lasts exactly 3 seconds. Then someone farts, heroically, and the music starts again. This isn't background noise. This is the tavern's heartbeat. Raw, rowdy, and relentlessly alive. If you listen closely enough, it starts to make sense, a kind of harmony born from disorder. And like the rest of the tavern, it only gets louder the longer you stay. Once the ale starts flowing and the stew starts settling, the tavern transforms. It's no longer just a place to eat and drink. It becomes a medieval casino, minus the velvet ropes and with way more yelling. Gambling is the sport of the evening, and everyone plays, from weathered soldiers to barefoot boys with borrowed dice. There's no dealer, no pit boss, no regulation, just a cracked wooden table, a handful of copper coins, and the vague promise that someone's about to lose their dignity. Dice are the game of choice, carved from bone, wood, or whatever was lying around. A popular game is hazard, a complex ancestor of modern craps, though most here are playing simpler versions. They clatter across tabletops like rolling thunder, each toss followed by a mix of cheers, groans, and accusations of witchcraft. No one trusts the dice. Everyone uses them. Then there are cards, if you're in a more cultured part of town. Thick, hand-painted, worn to the edges, and always missing 1 or 2. The rules shift based on who explains them. Sometimes you're trying to get the highest number. Other times you're matching symbols or just making it up as you go. It's like poker, but with more slapping. Wagers range from money to mugs to livestock. Yes, someone once bet their goat. Someone else bet their boots, and another bet their own freedom for the night. Spoiler, he lost. The regulars are slick. They shuffle quickly, roll slowly, and smile a little too wide. Cheating is, of course, half the fun. A hidden die here, A marked card there, a mysterious cough when the lucky player leans in. If you win big, you buy a round or risk getting jumped. If you lose badly, you smile, pretend you meant to, and slowly push your chair back toward the door. Side games erupt too. Arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the ever-popular, who can drink the most without falling over. The winner earns applause. The loser earns a night under the table and a headache that lasts until next market day. But even when the rules are unclear and the stakes are absurd, the energy is addictive. Because in a medieval tavern, luck isn't just a game. It's a gamble with your purse, your pride, and possibly your pants. As the night deepens and the tavern fills with warmth and humidity, a new kind of performance takes the floor, one made of words, music, and confident nonsense. This is story time, medieval style. A bard clears his throat in the corner, gently plucking at a half-tuned lute, the strings squeaking like old boots. He's missing a few teeth, but not a bit of confidence. With a dramatic flourish, he launches into a ballad of heartbreak and heroism, something about a knight who fell in love with a mermaid and drowned nobly while reciting poetry. No one believes him. Everyone listens anyway. That's how it works here. Truth is optional. Entertainment is everything. Around the tables, others join in. Not bards, just patrons with ale-fueled bravery and a tale to tell. One man swears he once wrestled a bear and lived to drink about it. Another claims he saw a witch turn a cow into a goat. A third insists he's related to Charlemagne on his mother's cousin's side. Everyone's story begins with, "You won't believe this, but," and they're right. You don't, but you want to. Boasts become ballads. Mishaps become myths. Someone tells a joke so bad it circles back to being good. Someone else recites a poem, likely plagiarized from a monk's scroll. The room claps, hoots, or throws bread, depending on the quality or quantity of the performance. If you're lucky, a skald or minstrel might be passing through, professionals who travel from town to town exchanging music for coins, meals, and occasionally a place to sleep indoors. Their songs are polished, their tales long, and their ability to rile up a crowd is dangerous. But even they know the golden rule of tavern tales: never let facts ruin a good story. In this smoke-filled room, with the fire crackling and the mugs sloshing, storytelling isn't just entertainment. It's tradition. It's connection. It's how you make friends, enemies, and the occasional lifelong drinking partner. By midnight, half the tavern is reenacting the story of the one-legged knight who fought off 6 highwaymen with a ladle. You laugh, you cheer, you forget it's all made up, because in a medieval tavern, every liar is a legend if the story is good enough. As the night deepens and the ale keeps flowing, something changes in the air, a kind of boozy boldness. The bard is halfway through his 3rd song about unfaithful shepherdesses, and suddenly, everyone's feeling romantic. Welcome to medieval flirting. Subtlety has left the building. It starts with eye contact, or at least one eye slightly squinting through a mead-induced haze. A man with 2 remaining teeth leans across a bench and slurs, "My lady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth." She responds by hurling a bread crust at his forehead. The room cheers. Others try their luck more gently, offering refilled mugs, clumsy compliments, or offers to help carry a bowl of stew so it doesn't spill. Spoiler: it still spills. If you're a woman in the tavern, staff, guest, or traveling merchant, you're likely used to fending off at least 3 would-be poets, 2 arm wrestlers, and 1 man who tries to impress you by balancing a knife on his nose. Sometimes it works. Usually, it ends with a black eye or an empty purse. For those actually seeking companionship, taverns offer more than just flirting. Courtesans work the room with practiced ease, knowing who has coin, who has charm, and who will pass out before making it to the stairs. Transactions are discreet, but the implications are loud. Jealous lovers? Oh, yes. Nothing sparks a tavern fight faster than a stolen glance, a wandering hand, or a husband catching his wife laughing a little too hard at the bard's joke about bishops. Tables are overturned. Mugs are weaponized. A bench gets broken in half, again. And yet, somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, genuine sparks fly. A shy baker's daughter and a traveling stonemason laugh over shared stew. 2 drunk farmers bond over a mutual hatred of turnips. A monk accidentally flirts with a nun. Love, or something like it, survives in even the rowdiest corners. Because in the medieval tavern, romance is equal parts charm, chance, and not falling face first into your bowl mid-sentence. You might win a heart. You might earn a slap. Either way, you're going to remember it, or at least hear about it the next morning. It was bound to happen. Maybe someone spilled a drink. Maybe someone accused someone else of cheating at dice. Maybe 2 people claimed the same bench and neither backed down. Or maybe, just maybe, someone said something about someone else's mother, goat, or soup. It doesn't really matter. Suddenly, it's on. The tavern, once a blur of music and mugs, turns on a dime. A stool flies. A tankard crashes to the floor. Someone yells, "Hold my bread," and launches themselves over a bench with all the grace of a drunk catapult. No one is surprised. In fact, most people don't even stop drinking. A bar fight in the Middle Ages isn't rare, it's expected. It's practically a feature. And while it sounds terrifying, it's usually more comedic than deadly. People swing wildly, miss, trip, and land in someone's dinner. Hair is pulled, beards are grabbed, shirts are torn. The tavern keeper roars like a battlefield general, holding a ladle in one hand and a club in the other. Occasionally, someone joins the fight with no idea why. They just saw action and leapt in, fists first. Others place informal bets, cheer, or slide their mugs out of the splash range. Weapons are rare. Most folks know better. Pulling a blade in a tavern can turn a casual brawl into a full-blown tavern legend with fatal consequences. And no one wants to be banned from the only place that serves hot food and warm ale. Eventually, someone hits the floor and stays there. Someone else stumbles into a wall and decides that's as good a place as any to sit and rethink their life. The fight burns out like a tavern candle, suddenly and without ceremony. And here's the strange part. Once it's over, it's over. The fighters are separated, mugs are refilled, someone starts a song, and within 10 minutes, everyone is laughing again, including the guy with the bleeding nose. No grudges, no lawsuits, just bruises, stories, and maybe a new nickname, like One-Eyed Arnold or Benchbreaker Bill. Because in a medieval tavern, a good fight is just part of a good night. Messy, ridiculous, and weirdly bonding. And if no one gets hurt too badly, it's just another round of entertainment. The brawl's over, the bard has passed out mid-ballad, and your stomach is full of mystery stew and slightly fermented cider. It's time to sleep, or at least attempt to. But don't expect a feather bed and lavender-scented linens. This is a medieval tavern, not a spa. If the tavern offers lodging, it's likely a creaky staircase away, up past slanted floors and beams low enough to test your skull's durability. The rooms are small, cold, and absolutely shared. Privacy doesn't exist. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some snoring like church bells, others dreaming loudly in languages you've never heard. The beds? Technically, most are just straw-stuffed mattresses, thin, lumpy, and crawling with what medieval folks fondly called companions. Fleas, lice, and other tiny, unwelcome bedfellows are a given. You lie down fully clothed, boots on, with your dagger under your pillow, not for comfort, but for defensive strategy. Blankets are shared, so are smells. And if someone had garlic for dinner, and someone always has garlic, it will become an intimate part of your dreams. If you're too poor or too drunk for a room, you sleep downstairs, on a bench, under a table, or just in a corner by the hearth, curled up next to a dog that may or may not belong to the tavern. You'll be stepped on, probably sneezed on, and maybe used as a footrest. The tavern never really quiets down. Even after the last mug is drained and the last fight patched up, there's always someone muttering in their sleep, a log popping in the fire, or a distant fart echoing through the rafters. And yet, somehow, you drift off. The warmth of the ale, the filling meal, the sheer exhaustion of the day, it all pulls you down into the dark. It's not comfortable. It's not clean. But it's safe enough. The fire keeps the worst of the cold away. The tavern keeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand, and the noise becomes its own kind of lullaby. Familiar, human, alive. You'll wake with a sore neck, a dry mouth, and a questionably acquired bruise. But for a few hours, you sleep in the company of travelers, rogues, farmers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring, straw, and the faint hope your boots are still there come morning. The warmth of the ale and the pottage spreads through you, a pleasant, heavy lethargy. The roar of the tavern begins to soften, the sharp edges of shouts and laughter blurring into a low, continuous hum. Your eyelids feel like lead weights. The flickering firelight of the hearth warps and dances, the flames becoming liquid gold. The smoky air, once an assault, is now a heavy, soporific blanket. You lean your head against the rough-hewn wooden wall, and the world begins to dissolve. The sounds of medieval England, the clatter of mugs and the cracking voices, fade into a gentle, rhythmic drone, like the buzzing of 1,000 bees. You are no longer in a cramped, crooked building. The walls melt away, and the thatched roof dissolves into a vast, star-dusted sky. You are drifting, floating on a slow, ancient current, carried along not by your own will, but by the gentle pull of a dream. The damp, chilly air of the north is gone, replaced by a dry, enveloping warmth that kisses your skin. The scent of wood smoke and stale beer has vanished, replaced by the smell of hot sand, exotic spices, and the sweet, loamy fragrance of a great river. The river you are on is not the Thames or the Severn. It is immense, powerful, its waters the color of lapis lazuli under an impossible sun. It is the Nile. You float down this timeless river, a silent observer on a journey through history itself. The landscape that slides by is alien and majestic. Gone are the green, rolling hills and dense forests. Here, there are endless stretches of golden sand, dunes that ripple like a frozen ocean, broken only by a thin, vibrant ribbon of green along the riverbanks. The silence is profound, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of the tavern. Here, the only sounds are the soft lapping of water against an unseen vessel and the whisper of a hot wind carrying secrets from the dawn of civilization. Your gaze lifts to the horizon, and you see them. Three colossal, geometric shapes piercing the flawless blue sky. The pyramids of Giza. They seem not to be built upon the earth, but to have grown from it, eternal mountains of stone that defy time and human comprehension. Their scale is breathtaking, humbling. And there, crouching at their feet, is the silent sentinel, the guardian of this sacred place, the great Sphinx. Its lion's body rests in the sand, the warmth of the ale, the filling meal, the sheer exhaustion of the day. It all pulls you down into the dark. It's not comfortable. It's not clean. But it's safe enough. The fire keeps the worst of the cold away. The tavern keeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand, and the noise becomes its own kind of lullaby. Familiar, human, alive. You'll wake with a sore neck, a dry mouth, and a questionably acquired bruise. But for a few hours, you sleep in the company of travelers, rogues, farmers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring, straw, and the faint hope your boots are still there come morning. The warmth of the ale and the pottage spreads through you, a pleasant, heavy lethargy. The roar of the tavern begins to soften, the sharp edges of shouts and laughter blurring into a low, continuous hum. Your eyelids feel like lead weights. The flickering firelight of the hearth warps and dances, the flames becoming liquid gold. The smoky air, once an assault, is now a heavy, soporific blanket. You lean your head against the rough-hewn wooden wall, and the world begins to dissolve. The sounds of medieval England, the clatter of mugs and the cracking voices, fade into a gentle, rhythmic drone, like the buzzing of 1,000 bees. You are no longer in a cramped, crooked building. The walls melt away, and the thatched roof dissolves into a vast, star-dusted sky. You are drifting, floating on a slow, ancient current, carried along not by your own will, but by the gentle pull of a dream. The damp, chilly air of the north is gone, replaced by a dry, enveloping warmth that kisses your skin. The scent of wood smoke and stale beer has vanished, replaced by the smell of hot sand, exotic spices, and the sweet, loamy fragrance of a great river. The river you are on is not the Thames or the Severn. It is immense, powerful, its waters the color of lapis lazuli under an impossible sun. It is the Nile. You float down this timeless river, a silent observer on a journey through history itself. The landscape that slides by is alien and majestic. Gone are the green, rolling hills and dense forests. Here, there are endless stretches of golden sand, dunes that ripple like a frozen ocean, broken only by a thin, vibrant ribbon of green along the riverbanks. The silence is profound, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of the tavern. Here, the only sounds are the soft lapping of water against an unseen vessel and the whisper of a hot wind carrying secrets from the dawn of civilization. Your gaze lifts to the horizon, and you see them. 3 colossal, geometric shapes piercing the flawless blue sky. The pyramids of Giza. They seem not to be built upon the earth, but to have grown from it. Eternal mountains of stone that defy time and human comprehension. Their scale is breathtaking, humbling. And there, crouching at their feet, is the silent sentinel, the guardian of this sacred place, the great Sphinx. Its lion's body rests in the sand, its human face gazing eastward, a timeless expression of serene, all-knowing power frozen on its features. For millennia, it has watched the sun rise, a symbol of royal strength and divine wisdom. This is the Egypt everyone knows, the one from postcards and history books, a landscape of monumental certainties. Explorers who have ventured to this place claim the land itself feels different, charged, as if memory clings to it like river mist. Beneath the murk, sonar scans have picked up geometric patterns and what appear to be blocks placed with intent. But what truly startles are the claims that this figure, this sphinx-like formation submerged near Giza, may predate the pyramids entirely, not by decades, but by millennia. If true, it would shatter the established chronology of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream timeline, a cornerstone of Egyptology, anchors the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE, built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafra. But this underwater form, if genuinely carved, could belong to an age when the Sahara was still green and the Nile ran wild through a wetter, lusher land. Skeptics, of course, dismiss it as a misidentified rock formation, a trick of the light and water on limestone, shaped by millennia of flooding and wishful thinking. They call it a simulacrum, a natural object that merely resembles something man-made. Geologists have a much simpler, less fancy term for rocks that look like things: rocks. Yet the grooves, the curves, the apparent alignment with celestial markers, it all invites more questions than answers. The site remains unexcavated. Official archaeologists have largely ignored it. Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it's everything. A relic not just of Egypt's past, but of a world lost to flood and time. For now, the so-called Underwater Sphinx lies quiet, not sleeping, but waiting. And if it could speak, one wonders what secrets it would tell, and why so many seem determined not to listen. The legend of this sunken guardian moved from whispered folklore to global curiosity in the 1980s. That's when a few independent researchers and divers began publishing strange reports, accounts of a massive, lion-bodied figure partially submerged near the Giza Plateau. Early photographs were grainy, inconclusive, and often dismissed. But they sparked something that couldn't be put back in the bottle: curiosity, and more dangerously, doubt. One of the most vocal early proponents was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have seen a weathered monument deep beneath silt and flood layers during a brief drought window. According to him, the figure wasn't an isolated rock or an erosion trick. It had geometry, legs, symmetry, even the faint suggestion of a carved face. Naturally, this challenged the traditional narrative. Egyptology as a discipline rests on structure and established timelines. The suggestion of another Sphinx, older and partially submerged, would require rethinking not just Egyptian history, but the timeline of human civilization itself. Mainstream academics responded with caution, even disdain. Without peer-reviewed excavation, carbon dating, or stratigraphic studies, the claim couldn't be taken seriously. Many argued the so-called Underwater Sphinx was likely a natural formation, limestone weathered by thousands of years of Nile flooding and sediment erosion. In Egypt, they pointed out, nature often mimics the intentional. Wind, water, and time are capable sculptors. But the photos kept circulating. The sonar readings continued to show odd patterns, too regular, too smooth, too suggestive. And then came the theorists. Authors, filmmakers, and fringe historians began building stories around the mystery. That the Sphinx was a relic of a forgotten civilization, perhaps Atlantean, perhaps pre-dynastic Egyptian, lost in a great flood that scoured the Sahara. They pointed to the water erosion patterns on the original Great Sphinx, argued for lost technologies, and hinted that what lay beneath the Nile might be far older than accepted memory allows. The debate grew louder, but the ground remained still. No official dig was launched, no museum claimed it, and the Sphinx, if that's what it is, remained right where it had always been, buried in silt, caught between myth and mud. The idea that something near Giza might predate the pyramids isn't just provocative, it's revolutionary. If the underwater Sphinx is more than erosion or coincidence, then Egypt's story didn't begin in the 4th dynasty. It began before it, deep in prehistory, when the Sahara was a green savanna and the Nile roamed wider, wilder, and less predictable. This possibility gained traction in the 1990s when geologist Dr. Robert Schoch studied the Great Sphinx itself. He argued that the deep, vertical weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure wasn't caused by wind and sand, but by rainfall, heavy, sustained, ancient rainfall, the likes of which hadn't touched the Giza Plateau since at least 7000 BCE. That pushed the possible date of the Sphinx back by thousands of years, well before the first pharaohs carved their names into stone. Geologists and archaeologists still debate fiercely whether the weathering patterns on the Sphinx enclosure are from wind and sand or from that ancient, torrential rainfall. But if water shaped the original Sphinx, could water also have hidden an even older sibling? The so-called Underwater Sphinx sits in a lower region, near ancient floodplains. Some satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar suggest possible foundations, rectangular outlines, and deliberate shaping, all buried beneath silt and seasonal water. These signs hint that the site may not just be older than the Sphinx. It may come from a time when nothing in Egypt was yet written in hieroglyphs. Supporters of the theory point to Egypt's missing chapters, the gap between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of the first dynasties. During this time, the Nile shifted courses, the Sahara transitioned from wet grasslands to dry desert, and civilizations may have risen and fallen, undocumented and erased. The idea that an ancient people, pre-literate and pre-pharaonic, could have shaped a monument of this scale seems implausible to traditional historians. But is it? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was built around 9600 BCE by hunter-gatherers. It features megalithic pillars with carved animals, predating Stonehenge by thousands of years. Could Egypt hold a similar secret? An ancient culture that marked the land with stone long before papyrus carried their stories? If the underwater Sphinx was built in such a time, it would change everything we know about human history. It would suggest not just forgotten ruins, but a forgotten age, one that may have whispered to the builders of Giza, leaving behind more than myth, perhaps a monument, drowned, then forgotten. Stone doesn't lie, it remembers. And around the site of the so-called underwater Sphinx, it tells a quiet but persistent story, not just of time, but of water. Sediment layers, erosion marks, and flood patterns hint at a history long before the desert became dry, long before the Nile settled into its familiar course, long before the pharaohs carved their names into history. Geologists who have examined photographs and data from the site near Abu Rawash note peculiar erosion marks, smooth, rounded grooves that suggest prolonged exposure to flowing water. Not wind, not sand, but rainfall and movement, forces absent from this region for thousands of years. Researchers who have surveyed the area note that the basin is geologically active, with high clay content and evidence of ancient water tables fluctuating violently. The stone there is heavily worn, but not randomly. The wear follows the shape of the structure itself, flowing in lines that suggest deliberate carving, then drowning. Some sediment layers around the site date back to the early Holocene, when Egypt was wetter, greener, and prone to massive flooding. If a monument had been carved then, it could have stood for centuries before being swallowed by mud, forgotten by shifting populations, and buried under the Nile's wandering silt. Skeptics argue this is all coincidence, natural formations teased into myth by hopeful eyes. But water doesn't typically form perfect symmetry. It doesn't carve paws. It doesn't create aligned foundations that echo the geometry of a known sphinx just a few miles away. So the question deepens. If water erased this monument from view, what else has it taken with it? And more urgently, how much of history still lies hidden beneath the surface? If the underwater Sphinx is truly there, silent, carved, and ancient, why hasn't it been excavated? Why does it remain beneath layers of mud and silence, passed over by archaeologists, ignored by governments, and left to the currents? The answer, like the artifact itself, lies beneath the surface. Egypt's archaeological institutions are protective, and rightfully so. The nation guards its ancient heritage with rigid protocols, strict excavation rules, and an insistence on academic consensus. Digging up any site, especially one that challenges the traditional timeline, requires permits, funding, international oversight, and most importantly, institutional approval. And that approval often rests on one unspoken rule: do not rewrite Egypt's history without a mountain of undeniable evidence. And that's the problem. The so-called underwater Sphinx has never received an official, state-sponsored excavation. Independent researchers, foreign academics, and fringe theorists have studied the area, but without formal backing, their findings remain anecdotal, suggestive but not conclusive. There's also the issue of the Nile itself. The river is not a static feature. It floods, recedes, and shifts over decades. The site where the monument allegedly rests is flood-prone, often submerged for much of the year. Excavation would require draining the area, rerouting water, protecting nearby ecosystems, and managing structural damage caused by centuries of sediment pressure. That alone would take years, if not decades. Then there are political factors. A discovery of this magnitude, if validated, would disrupt more than academic timelines. It could challenge established narratives, upset national pride, and attract a media frenzy Egypt might not be eager to welcome. The Ministry of Antiquities prefers to promote discoveries that reinforce Egypt's grandeur, not question its foundational history. Some whisper that certain institutions may already know more than they reveal, that preliminary studies have been done quietly behind closed doors. But without public records, peer-reviewed findings, or government announcements, these claims drift into conspiracy. And so the monument remains buried. Whether by accident or design, it sleeps under mud and skepticism. It is a strange irony that in a land obsessed with preserving its ancient past, one of its greatest mysteries may be hidden in plain sight, unclaimed, unstudied, and untouched by time's official record. But as your dreamlike gaze drifts away from the murky water, a thought lingers. What if it isn't just stone that gets buried by time and politics? What if a person, a queen, one of the most powerful women in the ancient world, could also be deliberately erased, her story swallowed not by mud, but by the shifting sands of politics and revenge? The current of your journey pulls you away from the sunken guardian and toward a time of dazzling light, of radical, blinding change. You leave the quiet potential of the ruin behind and are drawn into a story that was not lost, but hidden. A name whispers on the hot desert wind, a name that means, the beautiful one has come. Nefertiti. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze frozen in serene confidence, Nefertiti was a woman cloaked in mystery. Her name is a promise, a grand entrance. But no one knows exactly where she came from. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named I, a man who would, many years later, become Pharaoh himself. This theory would make her a native Egyptian of noble, but not royal, blood. Others argue she was a foreign princess, perhaps Tadu Hepa of the Mitanni Empire, sent to Egypt in a marriage alliance to seal a political treaty. Her origins are debated, a puzzle box with missing pieces, but her influence is undeniable. Nefertiti appears in the historical record like lightning, sudden, brilliant, and transformative. She enters the life of a young pharaoh named Amenhotep IV, not as a passive queen destined for the background, but as an equal partner in a reign that would shake Egypt's religious and cultural foundations to their very core. Together, they would dismantle centuries of tradition, discard the entire pantheon of powerful gods like Amun-Ra, Osiris, and Isis, and elevate a single, abstract deity as the one true god, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun itself. It was a radical, near heretical move, an earthquake that cracked the bedrock of Egyptian civilization. And Nefertiti wasn't just watching from the throne. She was leading ceremonies, making offerings to the Aten, even depicted in art smiting the enemies of Egypt, a role traditionally and exclusively reserved for male pharaohs. Unlike other queens who were relegated to the background, secondary figures in their husbands' stories, Nefertiti was ever present. She appears in more surviving artwork from the period than even her husband, the king himself. In these depictions, she isn't cloaked in subservience. She stands tall, sometimes depicted as the same size as the pharaoh, signifying equal status. She wears her unique blue crown, a symbol of her own authority. She holds power, quite literally, in her hands. And in a society where pharaohs were divine, her proximity to Akhenaten, both spiritually and politically, suggested something more. Perhaps she wasn't just a queen. Perhaps she was a co-ruler, a goddess on earth in her own right. But this rise wasn't without tension. Egypt was not ready for this kind of upheaval. The old priesthood, powerful and wealthy, resented the loss of their gods and their temples. The general populace was confused, their entire worldview upended. In a bold and decisive move, Akhenaten, the pharaoh, moved the entire capital. He abandoned the great city of Thebes, the heart of Amun-Ra worship for centuries, and built a brand new city from scratch out in the desert. This mainstream historical fact is one of the most dramatic in Egyptian history. The city was called Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten, known today as Amarna. This was a physical severing of ties with the old ways. And through it all, Nefertiti was there, her figure etched into the stone walls of the new temples, her name sung in hymns to the sun. Yet for all her visibility in life, her death is a complete vanishing act. No tomb, no body, no confirmed end. Just silence. It's as if history, after showcasing her brilliance, suddenly chose to look away. And that, perhaps, is where her legend truly begins. To understand Nefertiti's rise, you must first meet the man who changed everything, Pharaoh Akhenaten. He wasn't born with that name. He was originally Amenhotep IV, a prince in line with a 1,000-year legacy of gods and tradition. But something shifted inside him. Some call it divine inspiration. Others say it was madness. When he became king, he turned his back on the mighty god Amen and declared a new truth. There was only one god worth worshipping, the sun itself, the Aten. This wasn't just a religious shift, it was a cultural revolution. Imagine a society built for millennia around a complex web of temples, priests, and rituals, being told overnight that their gods were false, their worship obsolete. Akhenaten didn't just preach monotheism, he enforced it. The temples of Amun were shut down. His name was chiseled off monuments. Statues were smashed. Entire cities were abandoned. In their place, Akhenaten built Akhetaten, his city dedicated solely to the Aten, where the sun would rise directly between two cliffs and bathe the city in its sacred light. And through it all, Nefertiti stood at his side, not as a silent consort but as a full participant. In the reliefs of the period, she's shown worshipping the Aten with the same reverence as Akhenaten. Their 6 daughters are often depicted with them, heads tilted toward the radiant sun, its rays ending in tiny hands that offer them the Ankh, the symbol of life. It was a family portrait unlike anything in Egyptian art before or since. Even the style of the art changed. No longer stiff and formal, but loose, exaggerated, sometimes even intimate. The Amarna style, as it's known, showed the king and queen kissing, playing with their children, praying in soft, flowing robes beneath the sun. Nefertiti was everywhere in this new world. At times, she even seemed to overshadow her husband. Some historians believe she held real political power, maybe even acted as co-regent. There are inscriptions that refer to her using titles of immense authority. It's unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, strategy, or necessity, but it was clear. Without Nefertiti, this revolution may not have held together as long as it did. But revolutions are fragile. The gods don't take kindly to being replaced. And the people, they were quietly watching, waiting for the old order to return. By the height of her influence, Nefertiti had become more than a queen. She had become an icon, not just of beauty, but of divine femininity and royal power. Egypt had seen great queens before. Hatshepsut, who ruled as a male pharaoh, comes to mind. But Nefertiti's presence felt different. She wasn't ruling from the shadows or taking power through conflict. She was reshaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of Egypt beside her husband, in real time, as a living goddess. She bore Akhenaten 6 daughters, all of whom were frequently depicted in family scenes beneath the rays of the Aten. Curiously, no sons were ever confirmed. In a kingdom obsessed with lineage and male heirs, this was both a political problem and a historical mystery. What is certain is that motherhood was central to her image. In art, Nefertiti is portrayed cradling her children, their tiny arms reaching up to touch her cheeks. These aren't stiff, cold statues. These are living moments carved in stone, intimate, emotional, radiant. In an age where pharaohs were often distant gods, Nefertiti's portrayal as a nurturing mother softened the divine, making it human. Yet there was another side to her iconography, one far more powerful. In multiple depictions, Nefertiti wears her unique blue crown, a flat-topped crown usually associated with war and victory, and performs the sacred duties of a king without Akhenaten beside her. This suggests a quiet but radical truth. Nefertiti may have been preparing for something more than partnership. She may have been preparing to rule. Whispers in history suggest that after Akhenaten's health began to decline, possibly due to genetic disorders common in royal families or the stress of his radical reign, Nefertiti took on more governing responsibility. But this is where the record starts to fade. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, she vanishes from the public eye. No fanfare, no funeral inscriptions, no confirmed burial. Did she die young? Did she fall from power? Or was she about to become something even greater than a queen? Something history tried and failed to erase? One day, Nefertiti was everywhere, etched into walls, praised in hymns, ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, like a breath in the desert wind, she vanished. No ancient Egyptian queen had ever been so visible. Yet around year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the records grow eerily silent. Her name disappears from the inscriptions. Her image fades from the art. There is no tomb, no death announcement, no mourning scene. For a woman so central to Egypt's cultural upheaval, her absence is more than strange. It's a black hole in history. So what happened to her? One theory suggests the simplest answer. She died. Childbirth was risky, even for royalty. Nefertiti's second daughter, Meketaten, also disappears from records around this time. possibly indicating a dual tragedy, a mother and daughter lost in the same dark moment. But if that were true, why no elaborate funeral, no grand tribute, no temple dedicated to her memory? This was a woman revered like a goddess. A quiet death doesn't fit the script. Others propose something far more political. Perhaps Nefertiti fell from favor. Maybe the tides turned within the royal court. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated, could have sidelined her, possibly in favor of another consort. But the most electrifying theory is that Nefertiti didn't disappear at all. She transformed. Scholars fiercely debate whether Nefertiti assumed a new name, Neferuaten, and ruled as co-regent or even as sole pharaoh after Akhenaten's health declined or after his death. The evidence is tantalizing. An enigmatic figure named Smenkhkare appears briefly in the historical record, sharing the throne. Was this a male heir, a half-brother, or was Smenkhkare Nefertiti herself, ruling under a male guise, much like Hatshepsut had done before her? Adding to the puzzle, a ruler named Neferuaten also appears, and inscriptions for this individual sometimes use feminine grammar, even referencing Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Could this have been Nefertiti, crowned as pharaoh in her own right, joining the rarest ranks in Egyptian history as a female king? If so, her reign was short. Even this theory dissolves in the sand. Neferuaten's reign ends abruptly. And then comes a name more familiar, Tutankhaten, later Tutankhamun, a child king who would reverse his parents' reforms and restore the old gods. If Nefertiti did reign alone, it was as a ghost queen, visible only in hints, half-carved cartouches, and broken relics. A puzzle missing its centerpiece. And so, just as suddenly as she arrived, the most powerful woman in Egypt disappears. But her legend, that was just beginning to take shape. As the dust of Amarna began to settle, a new figure emerged, a boy king, barely old enough to hold a scepter. His name was Tutankhaten, later changed to Tutankhamun, and he would become the most famous pharaoh in the world, not for what he did in life, but for the treasures found in his untouched tomb. But what matters here is this: who was his mother? The historical records are frustratingly silent. His father was almost certainly Akhenaten, but the identity of his mother remains shrouded in confusion. Some scholars argue that Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others speculate she may have been his biological mother, pointing to DNA evidence from various mummies that, while inconclusive, keeps the possibility tantalizingly open. If Nefertiti truly bore Tutankhamun, his early reign, clearly guided by a steady hand, makes even more sense. And that's where the intrigue deepens. Who was steering the ship during Tutankhamun's fragile reign? The boy king was only about 9 when he took the throne. A child can't restore a religious empire alone. Someone was behind the scenes, someone experienced in court politics, religion, and public symbolism. Could it have been Nefertiti, ruling from the shadows? Or was it the high priest Ai, her possible father? Or perhaps both, working together to erase the chaos of Amarna and return Egypt to its old gods? One of the more compelling pieces of evidence comes from a golden shrine found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It shows a queenly figure anointing the young king, a woman with features eerily similar to Nefertiti. If that was her, it means she may not have vanished at all, but stayed at the heart of power in a more discreet form. Still, without a named tomb, without a confirmed mummy, we are left with only fragments. If she did guide Tutankhamun, her fingerprints are everywhere, but her name is gone, scrubbed from temples, left out of king lists, as though someone tried to erase the memory of a woman who once ruled like a god. For someone who stood at the center of Egypt's most radical era, queen, priestess, possible pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb. Not a single monument bears her death rites, no sarcophagus, no funerary mask, no inscription whispering her final words to the gods. It's as though she evaporated. This absence has haunted Egyptologists for over a century. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, where every noble was embalmed, mummified, and buried with instructions for the soul's journey, how could one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history be lost? One possibility is that she was buried hastily and without ceremony in the waning years of the Amarna period. Perhaps her radical legacy made her dangerous in the eyes of the new regime. Her tomb may have been dismantled, her name defaced, part of the sweeping effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. Another, more tantalizing theory suggests her tomb was never truly lost. It was simply misidentified or is still hidden. Some researchers proposed that she lies within the Valley of the Kings itself, concealed behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62, the famed tomb of King Tut, indicated possible hidden chambers. Was Nefertiti buried just inches away, sealed off and forgotten? The idea captured the world's imagination. Egyptologists held their breath, but further scans yielded inconclusive results. Excavations slowed, funding dried up, and once again, Nefertiti retreated into myth. Yet her absence is loud. We have her images, dozens, perhaps hundreds, her likeness captured in stone and pigment. And if her tomb was never found, if her body was never identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti? The answer sits behind museum glass, beneath soft lights in Berlin's Neues Museum, a painted limestone sculpture that has captivated the world since its rediscovery in 1912. The bust of Nefertiti. She gazes forward with poise and serenity, her long neck graceful, her blue crown distinct, her features so refined they almost feel modern. One eye is famously unfinished, a blank, white socket. This quirky detail has spawned countless theories. Perhaps it was a teaching model for the sculpture's apprentices. Perhaps it was damaged during the chaos that ended the Amarna period. Or perhaps, and this is the most poetic idea, the sculptor, Thutmose, left it that way intentionally, believing that only a goddess could truly see, and he could not presume to complete the gaze of a divine being. It's the ultimate ancient art mystery, a perfect imperfection. The bust was discovered by German archaeologist Ludwig Burchard in the ruins of Thutmose's studio at Amarna. When he brushed away the dust and revealed her face, he knew instantly what he had found. In his diary, he wrote, "No use describing it. You have to see it." And once the world did, Nefertiti became not just a historical figure, but a global symbol of beauty, of power, of ancient enigma. But even her bust is not without controversy. Germany acquired the artifact during a time of loose antiquities laws, and Egypt has been requesting its return for decades. To the Egyptians, she belongs at home, in the land whose sun once touched her skin. But Germany has refused, claiming her fragility makes her unsafe to travel. It's a diplomatic standoff over a 3,300-year-old queen. Still, her presence, wherever she may be, has changed how the world sees ancient women. She wasn't just a passive beauty. Her bust captures something regal, assertive, almost challenging. She looks like someone who held secrets, made decisions, changed the course of empires. And she did. It's remarkable how a single sculpture, delicate and silent, can resurrect someone lost to time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died. But through this bust, Nefertiti achieved something extraordinary. She became immortal, not in gold, but in human memory. The face may be still, but the story it tells continues to speak louder than ever across the centuries. A story of power, of revolution, and of a mystery so profound that it has outlived the empire that tried to bury it. And as your dreamlike journey takes in her serene, stone face, you reflect on this idea of legacy. What if a legacy isn't just captured in a single, perfect object, guarded behind museum glass? What if it isn't a story of power and sudden disappearance, but one of quiet, steady, and endless creation? What if a legacy is written not on stone, but across an entire landscape, a living monument tended by generations? The hot, dry air of Egypt begins to cool. The scent of sand and ancient dust is replaced by the smell of damp earth, wet stone, and green, growing things. The flat desert horizon dissolves, rising into soaring, cloud-shrouded mountains. The golden light of the autumn softens into a pearlescent mist that clings to the hillsides. You are no longer in the ancient past of pharaohs, but in a place where the past is still vibrantly, breathtakingly alive. In southern China, where the clouds hang low and the wind hums through bamboo groves, a dragon lies coiled. But it is no myth, no fire-breathing beast of legend. This dragon is made of earth and stone, carved by centuries of calloused hands and patient vision. It is the Longji rice terraces, known to locals as the dragon's backbone, and its curves ripple across the mountainside like scales, shimmering with water, rice, and ancient pride. From a distance, the terraces resemble a sleeping creature. Hills ripple with rhythmic precision, each layer rising and falling like the sinew of a living form. But step closer, and you'll find something even more alive. Water flows in soft whispers along carefully dug channels. Seedlings flutter in the breeze. And at dawn, the morning mist drapes the landscape like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. These terraces weren't built in haste. Their story began over 700 years ago. This is a mainstream historical fact. They were started during the Yuan dynasty, around the 13th and 14th centuries, when the Zhuang and Yao people, ethnic minorities with deep ties to the mountains, chose to tame the slopes rather than abandon them. Flat land was scarce. Machinery was non-existent. And so, they looked to the mountain and asked a simple question: how do we feed ourselves here? The answer took generations. Armed with little more than stone tools and bamboo baskets, they carved the hills inch by inch, year by year. With each level built, they not only shaped the land, they taught it to breathe with them. Rainfall became a resource. The steep slope became sustenance. Rice, the staple of life, began to grow where gravity once ruled. And over time, the terraces began to resemble a dragon in repose, strong, eternal, sacred. This was more than agriculture. It was harmony, a silent pact between humans and nature. No part of the mountain was wasted, and no part was forced to bend violently. Instead, the people worked with the earth, shaping it in curves and swells, listening to the wind, following the water. Today, the dragon's backbone still feeds entire villages. But more than that, it reminds us what patience can build. In a world racing forward, here lies a dragon that was never chased, only carved. Layer by layer, dream by dream. To walk among the Longji rice terraces is to step into a world carved by persistence. There is no illusion here, no machine tracks, no corporate survey markers. What stretches across these mountains are the fingerprints of human endurance. Every curve, every slope, every drop of water has been arranged stone by stone, with hands that knew the pulse of the land. Centuries ago, when the Zhuang and Yao peoples first looked upon these steep and unforgiving hillsides, they did not see obstacles. They saw opportunity. The fertile valleys were already taken. But up here, amid the rugged peaks, there was possibility, if only they could make the earth listen. With no heavy tools, they began. Wooden shovels, stone hoes, baskets of mud and rubble carried on backs worn by time. Slowly, terraces began to form, horizontal veins across the mountain, held in place by hand-stacked stone walls. These weren't accidental cuts into the slope. They were calculated. Each level had to be perfectly balanced, not only to hold water but to carry it from one tier to the next without waste. One miscalculation could cause an entire section to collapse. Too steep, and the water would rush away. Too flat, and it would stagnate. So they measured, not with rulers, but with generations of intuition. Children learned from their elders. Elders watched the seasons. And the mountain, in time, gave in, not with surrender, but with trust. Anthropologists debate whether these intricate terrace farming methods developed independently in isolated mountain communities like Longji, or if the techniques spread through cultural diffusion from other parts of Asia. Regardless of their origin, the result is a landscape that defies nature by flowing with it. From the valley base to the cloud-kissed peaks, these terraces rise like a spiral staircase to the sky. They mirror the topography with an elegance so profound it's as if the mountain grew them itself. But no, the mountain did not shape these curves. Humans did. With no engines, no concrete, no architectural degrees. Just time, just trial and error, just the belief that land, no matter how steep, can be made to serve life. Today, the terraces remain functional, still farmed, still repaired, still respected. No bulldozers, no shortcuts. The old ways survive, not because they resist the future, but because they proved something rare. That tradition, when rooted deep enough, can outlast every storm. If the dragon's backbone is muscle and bone, then water is its blood. It flows quietly, without pumps or engines, tracing ancient channels that slip from mountaintop springs into every terrace below. This hydraulic choreography is no accident. It is the secret life of the terraces, the reason they've endured for centuries. At the top of the mountain, Rainwater and natural springs are caught in narrow ditches and earthen canals. From there, gravity becomes the farmer's silent ally. The water descends through terrace after terrace, pooling gently in each field before spilling into the next. This design, fluid and seamless, ensures that every patch of rice receives what it needs. No more, no less. There are no valves, no switches. Control lies in subtle gates made of stone or wood, adjusted by hand and habit. If one terrace overflows, it could flood the next. If one leaks, a drought may follow. And so the villagers, guardians of this delicate system, walk the ridges daily, checking, adjusting, listening to the sound of the flow. It's less like farming and more like playing an instrument. One wrong note, and the whole song is off. But the water does more than feed the rice. It mirrors the sky. In spring, when the terraces are first flooded, the paddies turn to glass. They reflect the clouds, the sun, even the stars on a clear night. Visitors often describe the sight as surreal, like the mountain has become a living mirror reflecting both heaven and earth. Then comes summer. The water thickens with stalks of green. The reflection fades, replaced by movement, rippling rice plants swaying in the wind like an emerald sea. In autumn, the water glistens through the gold of ripened grain. And in winter, when farming ceases, snow and frost replace the flowing current. The dragon sleeps, but the channels remain, quiet veins awaiting spring. Time moves differently here, not by hours, but by moisture. By the first trickle of the mountain thaw. By the sound of frogs returning. By the scent of wet soil. In a world that measures time in seconds, the people of Longji still measure it in seasons and drops. And so the dragon lives, not in fire and flight, but in ripples of water pulsing gently through a living masterpiece of stone and soil. Spring in the Longji Mountains begins not with blossoms, but with water. As the snow melts in the higher peaks, streams trickle downward, breathing life into the waiting terraces. The mirror-like paddies are ready. The dragon stirs, and the people prepare for the ritual that ties them to every generation before them, planting the first seed. There is no grand announcement, only quiet movement. Farmers, young and old, rise with the mist. They walk barefoot along the narrow ridges, straw hats low over their eyes, baskets balanced on their backs. The air is thick with the scent of soaked soil and mountain wind. The paddies, flooded just days earlier, now shimmer like polished jade. This is not a task for machines. It never has been. Each rice seedling, grown in nursery beds, is transplanted by hand, one by one, line by line. The workers step into the cold water and press the tender stalks into the mud with gentle fingers. It's a rhythm that feels almost sacred. Back bent, arm out, hand press, repeat. All day, sometimes for weeks. Children follow, splashing in the shallows, mimicking their elders. They learn not from textbooks, but by standing in the water, feeling the resistance of the mud, learning the spacing by eye. It's how knowledge survives here, lived, not spoken. Scattered along the ridgelines and nestled in the crooks of the terraces are the heartbeats of the dragon's backbone. Villages like Ping'an, Daze, and Jinking. These are not just settlements. They are living museums of heritage, where every home, path, and balcony clings to the mountain like a memory that refuses to fade. The houses are built of timber, resting on stilts to protect them from the rains and the steepness of the slope. Their rooftops, dark and slanted, mirror the lines of the terraces they overlook. From above, they seem like wooden lanterns floating on waves of green. Inside, life is simple, warm, and deeply communal. Generations share a home. Meals are cooked over wood fires. The smell of rice wine and bamboo smoke drifts into the mountain air. The people here belong to ethnic minorities, the Zhuang and the Red Yao, each with their own language, customs, and stories. You'll recognize the Yao women instantly. This is a truly unique cultural tidbit. Their long, black hair, uncut since childhood, is coiled into elegant shapes atop their heads. A woman's hair is her most prized possession, and traditionally, it is only cut once in her lifetime, at a coming-of-age ceremony around age 18. The cut hair isn't discarded. It's woven into an ornamental headpiece that she will wear alongside her growing hair. Some let it fall like a silk waterfall when they bathe in the river, a scene so graceful it borders on myth. Despite modernization creeping up the mountain trails, traditions hold strong. Hand-woven clothes dyed in indigo, wooden looms creaking in quiet rooms, music played on reed pipes and bronze drums during village festivals. Weddings still involve ritual dances. The harvest is still welcomed with song. Hospitality is not a transaction here, it's a reflex. Guests are offered tea brewed from local leaves, rice wine in carved gourds, and stories passed down from elders who remember the mountain before electricity or Wi-Fi arrived. And yes, you can now find Wi-Fi in some of the guest houses, though locals might joke that the signal is weaker than the homemade rice wine. For centuries, the dragon's backbone was a secret kept by the mountains. But no place remains untouched forever. The road came, the wires followed, and tourists with cameras and smartphones climbed the hills alongside the farmers. The terraces faced a question they'd never had to answer before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, there was worry. But the people of Longji didn't just endure, they adapted. Villagers began opening their homes to guests, not as resorts, but as family stays. Visitors eat local meals, sleep in wooden stilt houses, and wake to the sound of roosters. The farming continues. Each season, locals still flood the terraces, still plant by hand, still harvest with sickles worn smooth by time. Tourism may bring income, but rice brings life. One supports the other. Both are essential. Some young villagers have left for the cities, but many return. There is something magnetic about the terraces, something deeper than nostalgia. The dragon's backbone didn't resist change. It absorbed it with grace and balance. The terraces remain, not because they are frozen in time, but because they breathe with it, flexing, adjusting, but never breaking. In the end, the terraces are more than fields. They are a vow, quiet, curved, and carved into the mountainside. A promise passed down from hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not just a wonder of agriculture or a masterpiece of engineering. It is the story of what happens when humans choose to live with the land, not against it. There were easier paths. The ancestors of Longji could have moved to valleys, chased flatter ground. But they stayed. They studied the slope, listened to the stone, followed the water, and in doing so, they made the impossible ordinary, feeding villages on a mountainside. Every curve holds a lesson, not just about rice, but about patience, about legacy, about care. These terraces weren't built in years or even decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to harmony, no machine that can replicate the knowledge etched into each stone wall. And yet, nothing about them is frozen. They are alive. They evolve. They bend with the weather, with the needs of the people, with the shape of the world. That's their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. To walk the dragon's backbone is to witness a contract between humans and the earth, a contract signed with sweat and sun, renewed with every harvest. It's a reminder that progress does not always mean speed, and that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it murmurs, like a stream slipping over stone. And now, your long journey through time and place is coming to a close. The vibrant greens and golds of the rice terraces begin to soften, the misty mountain air becoming a gentle, soothing blanket around you. The distant sound of a village festival fades into a soft, rhythmic hum, like the fan you might have turned on hours ago. The whispers of ancient pharaohs and the rowdy laughter of medieval taverns have all dissolved back into the river of time, leaving only a profound sense of peace. The stories have been told, the mysteries have been pondered, and now all that is left is the quiet space between wakefulness and sleep. Allow the gentle weight of tonight's journey to guide you down into a deep and restorative rest. There are no more crooked buildings to navigate, no more ancient riddles to solve. There is only the stillness of your room, the comfort of your bed, and the silent promise of a new day waiting on the other side of your dreams. Let your breathing slow, let your mind drift, and let the last remnants of these ancient worlds fade into the soft, quiet darkness. End of script. Sweet dreams.